just want to say quickly that the webinar is being recorded. We've got the lovely Amanda captioning for us today. We're going to have a short break about halfway through, and feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and use the quick Q&A button for any questions you've got. I'll hand over to Matthew now for his amazing presentation.
Hello to everyone, and apologies for the late start. The good old technical gremlins managed to rear their ugly head again. So let's crack on. Today's session is called Optimizing the Customer Funnel. And I guess the best introduction to do to this is explain who the company that I work for is. They're called IMRG, and we are the UK's e-commerce association. We exist to provide people who sell stuff online with market benchmarks and useful insights to show how the rest of the industry is actually performing. The way it works is we have a panel of about 160 retailers who give us their website sales figures. They will tell us exactly how much money they've made on their website each week, how many orders they had, how many people visited their site, how many people put something in the basket and then left, how many people looked at different product pages, lots and lots and lots of different interesting metrics around how their website is performing is sent to us. So it's quite sensitive information, really. And what we'll then do is essentially add up all the numbers to create benchmarks to show you here's how our panel is collectively performing. Those numbers then represent a really good benchmark to compare yourself against. It's pretty hard to know whether you're actually doing well or not if you don't have some kind of yardstick to measure yourself against. And so that is what this presentation is. It is a quick view at some of the conversion stats that you will see on typical retailers' websites. And I'll explain the exact detail of how it all works as we progress through the slides. To give you a quick idea of who is in that panel, the 160 retailers that I mentioned, it is a really good sample of the UK's online industry. So we have very, very big retailers from the likes of John Lewis and Marks and Spencer's and Boots and ASOS and New Look and B&Q and you name it, they're probably in there. But we also have quite a large list of smaller, lesser known companies, smaller family run type things as well. So ultimately we have a pretty good spread of what is actually going on in the market. And ultimately the numbers that you're about to see are therefore a good representation of what the industry is actually doing. So let's crack on. The first thing that I must kind of put as a little caveat at the beginning of this presentation is throughout the slides here, we've used a few screen grabs and a few kind of examples of particular retailers, just so we can point out what it is that we're talking around. But the use of those images don't necessarily infer that any particular retailer's performance is good or bad, or indeed that they're in our panel. We kind of have to put this up as a little precursor note, because what we typically deal with at IMRG is sensitive information. It's normally under NDA strict kind of disclosure stuff. So we can't be seen to kind of be implying anybody's specific performance. So let's start from the top. Let's start with the really basic stuff. Conversion rates. That is, of all the people that visit your website, how many will actually buy something from you during that session? It is the most basic of all the measurements that you should probably be looking at on your website. And indeed, you should be looking at it by device type. So which device the person visiting your website is actually using. The industry average for a smartphone is a 2.6 conversion rate, which means, just to completely spell out the obvious, if 100 people visited your website, you would see 2.6 of those people buy something from you. Tablets, do you think tablets is higher or lower as an average? It's a larger screen size. Are people more inclined to buy from you? Yes, the answer, that is a 3.5% conversion rate. And ultimately, a desktop gets the best rate overall at 5%. So you can see the much bigger, larger screen on the right-hand side there does generally create a much higher propensity for somebody to go and buy something from your website. But these numbers that you're looking at there are the overall industry averages for an entire website journey. So that's someone coming onto your website, they go on, they look at a product page, they skip around, go have a look at a few different things. They then might add something to their basket, go to the checkout, mess around a little bit, and then they might buy from you. There's a lot of different checkpoints along that journey that a customer can do that can be measured. And that's what's known as the customer funnel. And specifically what I'm going to show you here are the stats for the smartphone customer funnel. So to clarify it completely, the customer funnel has 4 different stages that a visitor to your site will go through. The first stage is out of all the people that come to your website, all those hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of people that visit your site, what percentage of those actually look at a product page during that session? They could go and look at loads of other stuff. They might look at your store opening times, and they might look at a blog that you have, or they might just look around and search for products, but they don't actually end up on a product page itself. The second stage of the customer funnel is of all those that have looked at a product page, how many will actually add something to their basket? They'll click that magic button that says, yes, please, add it to my cart. The third stage is out of all those people that have got something in their basket now, how many decide to proceed to checkout? And then lastly, of all those that have started the checkout, how many actually complete it? So there's 4 checkpoints there upon which you can measure the number of people that start it and how many actually convert through to the next stage. We get told what those percentages are by our panel of retailers. And what we're going to show you now is what that funnel looks like for the average retailer who is having visitors visit them from a smartphone. So I think we've got a little poll that we're going to bring up here to let you guys guess what you think the percentage is. So what you have to guess, it should pop up on your screen now, is out of all the people that visit a website, what percentage do you think will actually look at a product page during that session? Take a little click, guess what the number you think is. Please do vote, and we'll reveal the answers shortly. Give you a couple of seconds to fill it in. Do you think it's 12%, 31%, 54, 88? Carol has put something rather amusing in the chat to say that you do already have the slides. That's just mean-spirited, Carol. Don't be too tricky. If you haven't looked at the slides, please do take a guess. The answer, by the way, is 54%. So roughly over half, pretty much, will go and look at a product page. So just to make this visible, on the right-hand side, pretend you are a retailer that gets 1 million site visits. That means that 540,000 actually go and look at a product page. We did have the results. Can we just pop the results back up on the screen? Is that possible from the, there we go. Oh, so only 22% of you managed to guess 54%. The majority, it was split between 12 and 31. So this is interesting news that you guys think it is lower than the industry average. So the next stage of the funnel is what percentage of those people, of those 540,000 people, actually go and click the button that says add to basket. What do you think it might be? And we have a poll again. If we could pop up the second poll now, so you can guess what this percentage is. So what you're looking to guess here is what percentage of the remaining 540,000 will actually go and add something to their basket. What do you think that could be? The options are 14%, 25%, 31%, or 44%. What do you think the industry average might be? Cast your vote now. I feel a little bit like Jeremy Clarkson or Chris Tarrant here on a Ask the Audience kind of place your answer A, B, C, or D. This is quite entertaining. The average is 14%, which means so 14% of the 540,000 leaves you with 75,600. And the results are in. So, it was close, but the majority of you, 48%, so just under half, thought the answer was going to be 25%. Only 29% of you got the answer right. So let's push down the funnel. We'll work through the rest of this a little bit quicker. The percentage of people that then go to checkout, so this is the percentage of the remaining 75,600, on average is 38%, which leaves you with that many people on the right-hand side left in your funnel. And lastly, arguably, the most important piece is the payment bit. And you will, on average, have just over half of all the people that start your checkout actually complete, give you their credit card details and an address somewhere to send it to. So you're left with 15,226 people, which is roughly a conversion rate of about 1.5%, just like you saw on the slide before. Smartphone is 1.5, 1.6%. So that is the customer funnel for a smartphone. The numbers do change for a tablet and for a desktop. Generally, smartphones starts to be a bit rubbish as you get past the add to basket stage. Desktop is really good at the checkout, which shouldn't be a surprise to you. But what you're looking at is averages, and within the scale of all the numbers that we get sent by our retail panel, there are some who do really well, and there are some who don't do quite as well. And ultimately, we end up with an average. But what we try and do is give you a little bit more information to explain A, what that spread looks like, and B, why some retailers might be higher up the chain than others. So that's what we're going to go look at now. We picked out, just for this presentation, stage 2. We're going to look at the add to bag rate of different retailers. So it's this bit here. The benchmark is an average of 14%. So what we did, we went into our panel of retailers that give us their data, and we pulled out, I think this is about 45 retailers at random. So each one of these little figureheads that you can see along the top there represents a retailer. Each one of these little heads is a retailer, and they will all sit in one of these 7 different product categories, depending on what they sell as a company. So we're going to put a little icon below each of these retailers to show you which product category they sit in. So you've got clothing, health and beauty, gifts, home and garden. The pink stars, by the way, that's called multi. To explain that, that is essentially somebody like a department store who sells in lots of different product categories. And these retailers are ranked from those who have the best add to bag rate on the left, all the way down to those who have the worst add to bag rate on the right. So you can see that generally 14% is in the middle. If you get anything above 20, you're doing very, very well. And just to repeat, these are the stats that you will find on a smartphone customer funnel, not desktop or tablet. So there's a whole different bunch of reasons why someone's add to bag rate may be high or low. One of the primary factors is going to be price and promotion, what's going on that website. But another big consideration is the way that that product is being displayed on the page. The layout, the design, all the features and functionalities that exist on that page that can help the customer have an easy journey and possibly convert at a higher rate. So what we then do at IMRG is we'll go and look at each of these retailers' product pages and note down all the features and functionalities that each of these retailers has. And hopefully we can start to spot some patterns among the same behaviors of the top performers against the bottom ones. So, for example, as an opening gambit, the first thing that we went and looked at was, do they have videos on their product page? It's pretty common amongst fashion retailers for you to have a video of the model walking up and down a catwalk showing you the product. Or on an electronics website, they might give a demonstration, or on a gifting website, they might actually show the product perhaps. So which of these retailers actually has video on their product page? We're going to put this little video icon below the little head of the retailers to show you who has it and who doesn't. Now this was quite interesting because we were kind of under the impression before we looked at this to see who was going to have video and who didn't, that all of those icons were going to be leaning towards the left-hand side. And there's not a massive trend there. There is quite a lot of gaps on the right hand side here, particularly amongst the really low numbers. But equally, there's not a big concentration on the left hand side. So it doesn't immediately infer that video is one of those huge drivers increasing in add-to-bag rate. But we have heard anecdotally that it is very, very actually helpful for improving conversion. But it's very expensive to run, and it's not always the easiest thing to get to work on all devices. Indeed, something that we thought might be interesting for you to see is the number of retailers in our sample that have video on their product pages, and we've plotted it across 3 different years. And it's shot up, frankly. Just last year, nearly half of all the retailers in our sample have it. So if you're not thinking about doing it, it's looking like it's becoming the norm for retailers to have it on their site. Definitely something to consider. So let's go back to our little chart. What about the next thing that we're going to look at? Something that we noticed that might be interesting to look at is the share item via social media. So what does that look like? It's this sort of thing. So we've got a couple of examples here where you can post that item on social media for other people to follow. And the idea is, if that then gets posted onto social media, anybody looking at it can then click on it, and they will then go straight through to a product page. So hopefully you're directing a lot of people to a product page who will then add it to basket, possibly something that can increase it. So let's go back, see if it had any influence whatsoever. We'll give it the good old social network icon. And no is the answer. It doesn't really look like it. There's no particular trend there. What we're looking for is a big dominance of icons on the left-hand side as opposed to the right. Now, there is something extra that's rather interesting to back up why this doesn't seem to be that influential on an add-to-bag rate. And we're going to take a little detour now, but it's going to show you something that's really useful. And what it is something called a share of revenue via different marketing channels. So if you were to look at all the revenue that a retailer has, put it into a big pie, you can split it up depending on which marketing channel the customer came to your website from. So if you do what's called a last click attribution model, that is, what was the last click that somebody did to get you onto their site? Was it a click from an email? Was it a click from a Google ad? Was it a click from an affiliate website? If they then go on to buy something during that journey, you can attribute the money that they've just spent to you back to that email channel or back to the Google ad channel. So you can work out of all the money that you've made, which one of those channels is actually making you the most money. And we get told by our retail panel what that split looks like. So pretend that you're looking at a pie here. Google ads, spending on Google ads, typically will represent about a quarter of your typical retailer's revenue. Affiliate websites will represent about 7.5% of all the money. So to clarify, that means somebody has clicked on an affiliate website where you happen to be mentioned. They've gone through to your site. They've liked what they've seen. They've purchased it. That money, on average, will represent 7.5% of a typical retailer's overall revenue. Email will represent about 12% of a typical retailer's revenue. SEO, as in search engine optimization, getting yourself to the top of the Google search rankings is a big one. That's typically about a quarter of a retailer's revenue. Social, we just showed it. How much do you think social represents? It is less than 2%. That explains why the add to bag rate doesn't seem to be influenced very highly by social links. This is not to mock social media because it plays a very, very important role in increasing awareness and getting general eyeballs onto your product. But when you are measuring it on a last click model, as in the last thing that they clicked on, typically that purchase doesn't really happen straight from the social network to your website. It'll probably raise their awareness further up the funnel when they're generally browsing, but the final conversion rarely comes from social media. Going direct, so www.retailer.com, roughly a fifth. Display ads represents a teeny tiny portion, and anything else, perhaps like referral networks or something, that is the final 5%. So those numbers should be really useful for you to go and look at to compare where your own stats come from. If you are brand new to e-commerce and this is all fresh, first time you've ever seen it, typically Google Analytics can set this up for you quite quickly. It's a fairly standard measure within Google Analytics. So go bury yourselves in that and see if you can work out what your own numbers are. So let's pop back to our little list. And next up, we're going to look at urgency messaging. This one is great. It's this sort of thing where you're looking at a product page and you're really hoping someone's going to add the bag on it, but they pop up a little flash that says, ooh, 224 people have put this in their bag in the last 2 days. Or, oh, wouldn't you know, 10,000 other people are also looking at this product. Is that the sort of thing that can increase somebody's likelihood to add something to their bag? What do you think? Let's go back and have a little look. And we will pop in the urgency messaging icon. Lo and behold, it does seem as though if you were to draw an imaginary line down the center here, right down the middle, there are far more on the left-hand side than there are on the right. So as a big driver, urgency messaging does seem to be one that can move that needle quite considerably. And it's also increasing in its popularity. Just like I showed you for the video idea, we've tracked it across 3 different years to show you what percentage of all the people in our panel are actually doing it. And it's gone up and then dipped slightly. In 2020, there was a little bit of a, what would you call it, media furore, or kind of a little bit of a storm going on in the news networks around how urgency messaging can be a negative thing for people that are slightly more vulnerable when shopping online. It can increase their likelihood to buy something that perhaps they don't want to. And also there was a lot of detail around how travel websites would say that, oh, 16 people are looking at this room right now and only 1 left. You must purchase quickly. But it turns out they weren't necessarily telling the whole truth, that when they said the room that you were looking at, it didn't count for the specific day or the specific location that you were looking at. It was generally that one hotel chain across an entire period. It was a little bit of a naughty white lie that they were telling. So urgency messaging got a bad rap, and we actually think that some retailers took it off their website as a consequence. So something that is also worth considering when we're looking at urgency messaging is, where is it put on the actual journey? The retailer on the left decides to put the urgency messaging before the product page, whereas the retailer on the right actually puts it on the product page itself. There is a split in terms of how likely retailers are to do either option. Generally, 2/3 will put it on the product page and 1/3 will put it on the search results page. So if you are considering implementing it, that is an extra consideration that you need to think about. So let's pop back to our little grid of things that we're adding up. And the last thing that we thought would be interesting to look at is, do you put the delivery pricing on the product page itself? PDP stands for product display page there, by the way. So it's this sort of thing where on the retailer's actual product page, you've got on the left-hand side there an example of how much you are going to pay visibly in front of you on that product page. It's a very good thing to actually put on the page itself to alleviate any mystery for that consumer to know, oh, how much am I going to end up paying for this product to actually be sent to my house? Let's go have a little look to see how many people actually put this delivery pricing on the product page. Again, quite interesting. If you were to draw a line down the center here of the top half against the bottom half, there are more on the left than there are on the right, i.e. those that have the higher add to bag rate are a little bit more likely to go and put delivery pricing on the PDP. Now, all of these things in isolation, where we've got video and we've got the social items and we've got the urgency messaging and we've got the delivery pricing. On their own, they are going to struggle to move the needle that much. But it is a case where when you add them all up together collectively, they can actually make an influence over who's got a high add to bag rate and who's got a low one. And to give you a little view as to actually why it does make a difference, let's split this into three. The top third, the middle third, and the bottom third of retailer performance. If you go and average the number of icons that sit within each third, there is 1.2, 1.9, and 2.4. That is not a coincidence. The more likely you are to, the more of these options that you have on your site, the more likely you are going to be to add your little add to bag rate, getting it higher and higher. So that's the add to bag rate bit. We've done that for the whole funnel. We've looked at loads of different stuff across the home page, across the checkout, across the product page. And in a second, I'm going to show you what that grid looks like for the entire customer funnel. But first, we do have a quick 3-minute break. If you need to go and get yourself a coffee, get yourself tea, we're just going to pop off for 3 minutes and we will be back. So stay tuned. Righty-ho, let's crack on. So I said that we're going to show you the full funnel. This is what it looks like. So this is, I think it's about 50 retailers, all individual. And this is their product categories, just like before. And this is their overall smartphone conversion. So for the entire website. And that's what we're about to look at. Just like we went through a slide with you to show you what the specific different features and functionalities look like for the add to bag bit. This one slide is a really good summary of the entire customer funnel and all the features and functionalities that we ended up looking at. So full site functionality is what we're calling it. The first thing is that we went and looked at is a active search result when you actually type in. So if you typed in women's shirt, as you're typing, does it predict what you're looking for and give you those answers as an option, or does it just kind of hope that you've spelt it right and it's going to turn up? Those retailers did that. We're going to run through lots of different features and functionalities now, and this does get quite complicated, so I will try and take my time on it. The next thing was, can you add to bag from the search results? So that's quite common. Do you remember that? Where you can go and say, yes, add this to my bag without even ever looking at a product page. How many retailers do that? Quite a lot actually offer that functionality. How many retailers have a blog? Is that something that's going to increase your likelihood to purchase from them? Maybe, it would appear. How many have an alert me when available functionality? That is when you have run out of a product and you give the option to the customer to sign up to an email that will send an alert to them to say, oh, that product is back in stock. Would you like to come and purchase it from us? That's quite rare for people to have that. No discerning trend there to say yes or no, whether it increases conversion. Next up was video, just like you saw. We're now onto the add to bag bit, and we did the social network bit, which is here. And we did the urgency messaging, which I think is here. And we did the delivery bit, which is here. So moving away, now we're going to go look at delivery options. How many retailers allow you to have stuff delivered for free with no minimum spend? That was rare, but notably, they are all within the top 2/3. How many will give you free delivery when you spend over a certain threshold? Quite a lot of retailers will go and do that. How many will give you paid next day as an option? A lot of people. How many will give you free next day? That's going to be rare, surely. Yes, only 3 retailers will give it to you for free the next day. Who allows you to pay by PayPal? This many people. Who allows you to pay by Apple Pay? This many people. Who allows you to pay by Google Pay? And lastly, who allows you to buy with a buy now, pay later functionality, something like Klarna perhaps? These retailers. So there's a lot going on that spreadsheet. There's a lot of icons. There's a lot of features and functionalities, from the way the search gives you the results, to blogs, to urgency messaging, to delivery options, to what payment type you can do. All the things that you might likely be thinking about putting on your own website. And just like before, there is a pattern, but it's slightly hidden unless you actually go and dissect the numbers. So just like before, we're going to split it up, but we're going to do it into 5 different sections now. So we really do have a kind of a top bunch, a top 10 or so, a middle 10 and a bottom 10. We're going to average the number of icons that each section has. And wouldn't you know, there again is a wonderful trend. None of these options on their own are dynamically, creatively, wonderfully going to change your overall conversion. It is the sum of its parts is the general theme across all of this. So if that is useful, hopefully that's something that you can then take away, gives you food for thought, essentially, as what you may or may not want to go and put on your website. And again, please remember, all of these things that you have seen are the conversion rates for a smartphone. Now, we've got about 7 minutes or so before we jump into the Q&A. I thought it would be quite fun to end this little presentation on something entertaining to do with apps. Now, it's quite unlikely that those people watching here are considering putting an app to go with their website. Generally, apps are the domain of the rich and the large retailers, simply because it's quite a heavy investment cost. But should you wonder around their performance, whether they're actually any good or not, we've got a few little stats to show you that we thought would be quite fun to share. So the first thing that we thought is the first thing to check is actually how much traffic goes to an app. How often do they get used overall? So if you were to look at the average retailer without an app and the average retailer with an app, and you can then split down all of the traffic, all of the visits that go to their site, depending upon one of these 4 different criteria. So all the traffic that comes from a smartphone, an app, a desktop, or a tablet. So on the left here, the typical retailer that does not have an app will see about 61% of all the traffic visit their site via a smartphone. They'll then get about 27% on average from a desktop, and the remainder goes via a tablet. But if you are one of those retailers on the right that happens to have an app, you will see less come through a smartphone. Around 14% will come via an app, 20% from a desktop, and 13% from a tablet. So you can see there that an app will really chew into the traffic that comes from a desktop or a smartphone in terms of overall share. It's important to note that this is not overall volume of traffic, but it is the share of traffic. So this is not saying that you're going to get the same volume of traffic if you have an app. It's instead saying, if you were to total up all of the bits that you get, how is it divided out? So this is the fun part now, where we're going to step into what I like to call the IMRG casino. And we are going to play a game of higher and lower. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull out 2 cards. Card on the left represents the browser version of a smartphone, i.e. you've gone on your little iPhone or your Samsung and you've gone direct to the website, that's the browser version, or the app, where you specifically clicked on that app icon and you are shopping with that company via an app. When it comes to the average session length that someone spends on your website, on a browser, the average is 229 seconds. Sitting at home, maybe you can pop it into the chat if you like. Do you think that an app will have a higher or lower average session length than a web browser for the typical average retailer in the UK? Do you think consumers are more glued to an app? Do you think they're more likely to stay involved and spend longer? Pop it into the chat if you think it's higher or lower. Emily's gone for higher, and Carol has gone for higher. Well, Carol and Emily, I am backing you guys, because the answer is indeed higher, by quite a considerable margin, actually. Next up, we're going to do the same idea, but instead of session length, we're going to look at the number of page views that the typical user will look at. A web browser, on average, hits just under 5 page views. Once again, do you think higher or lower? Why do you think? What do you think the app will have, higher or lower page views? The answer is way higher, much higher, in fact. And lastly, a pretty important one: average basket value. That is the average amount that someone will spend with you during a single transaction. On a smartphone, on a web browser, that is typically £50. Do you think people spend more or less, higher or lower, on an app? Toby's gone for higher. He's really gone for higher there. So well done, Toby, in the chat, because you are correct. It is a nice chunk more, actually. So that works out at about 20% higher. So it's 3 for nothing on the old app. Longer sessions, more page views, more money. But the final question that needs to be answered, and it's the big one, and it's what we've been talking around all day: conversion rate. Do you get a better conversion rate on a smartphone web browser, or do you get it on an app? And the way we're going to decide this, the final flurry of fun, is via a good old roulette wheel. Now, instead of numbers around the edge, where you normally have a bunch of numbers that you're going to place your bet on, we're going to have an app or a web browser. And it's down to you to decide, do you think the web browser or the app is going to get the higher conversion? We're going to spin the ball, and we're going to find out which one it lands on for the higher conversion. Is it an app or is it a web browser? Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen. Place your bets, because the answer is an app. It has a whopping increase in conversion. 3.9% is what the average app will get. So very impressive. Well done to apps. They are a great thing to have. They're fantastic, but they are expensive to implement. And the problem is so few people actually manage to get it to work properly. So final conclusion slides. Here are the top stats that you want to be looking at: website conversions, smartphone, tablet, and desktop. Important thing to note is that if you've been looking at any of these stats today, your conversion rate will largely be influenced by your average basket value. If you happen to sell something that is really expensive, your conversion rates are typically going to be lower. A good example is the home and garden retailers or electrical retailers, who typically will have an average basket value in excess of £100. They will generally get a lower conversion rate. And a couple of top tips: free and fast delivery does always work well. Urgency messaging is pretty good. It's one of the best drivers that we know, but do weigh up those pros and cons. And lastly, do go take a little look at that marketing channel split that we talked around, the last click stuff, because that should be pretty useful for you as well to work out where you're spending your ad money, yes or no. And so that is it. We've run out of time. 10 minutes left on the nose for some Q&A. I hope that was useful. A bit of a weird and wonderful kind of dive into the world of e-commerce and stats that we have.
Thank you ever so much, Matthew. That was amazing. We have had some questions come in, so I'll crack on and ask you those. The first one was, do you think using videos has an impact on conversion rates?
Yes, it does. So the little sample that we had there, it wasn't an immediately clear-cut thing, but we've spoken to many retailers anecdotally and about them having video on their site, from the biggest companies that you can possibly think of all the way down to small ones. And by and large, the general consensus is that yes, video really helps. It does increase conversion or add to bag, but it's just so damn expensive to actually go and record all of those videos for all the products that you have and any new products that you might have. It's kind of only in the world of those that have the luxury of a lot of money and a large budget.
Yeah, that does make sense. I think when you're looking at things to buy online, it's all the information you have, isn't it? What you see on the screen. So it makes sense that it would make an impact on the conversion. But I can appreciate it. It's a lot of work that goes into that kind of thing. The next question was, what's the best way for tracking the customer funnel on a website?
Go and have a look at Google Analytics. Literally just Google customer funnel, Google Analytics, and you
Okay.
should see some instructions how to get it set up.
Fantastic.
There'll be a little bit of tagging that you need to set up, but generally GA will take care of the rest.
Amazing. And Tina asks, why have you chosen to use a smartphone only rather than a comparison to desktop as well?
We have this study for the overall devices, so everything combined, and we've only done one specifically for smartphone. The wider this presentation that you've just seen here is a little snippet from a bigger presentation that's about 2 hours long. It takes a lot of work to make all that stuff work and get the numbers right. We just simply haven't had the time to do the other devices in as much detail.
That makes sense. And another question is, are all the add to bag and smartphone conversion stats based on a year-long term, over a year? Or, what's the time frame for those stats?
They are from Q1 2020.
Okay, brilliant.
So it's pre-pandemic madness.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then there's one final question. Is there a particular combination of site functionality which particularly sways conversion rates?
I don't know, to be honest. There's so many different ways you can cut it, and it does depend on what your customer is like. You might have an older demographic who aren't interested in flashy animations and videos and stuff. They might just want the basic text. It's quite hard to give a universal answer to that.
I understand. So it's more about thinking about what your customer needs are and what the sort of things that they would like to see. And
Yeah,
actually probably a general amount of experimentation to see what's more effective.
Very much. There are some general rules that you'll need to apply, like some of the stuff that we've shown you on here today, like free delivery, fast delivery, giving some good payment options, urgency messaging is an interesting one, but there's no one formula that works for everyone.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what you're selling, etc. as well. So actually another couple of last minute questions have come in. We're currently in the process of redesigning our website to improve the e-commerce aspects of it. Do you have any top tips or things that key things that we should focus on with the new site?
Social proof, customer reviews. We've done quite a lot of research, and it wasn't featured in this particular presentation, but there is a lot of evidence to support the more prominent you can make social proof on your website, i.e. reviews and recommendations from previous people that have purchased stuff from you. That really helps.
And yeah, sorry, I'm back in back in the room. The last question, do you think apps increase the market share, or do you think they're downloaded by people that are into the brand generally, so would tend to probably spend more time on the app anyway?
That's a fantastic question. I actually agree with that comment. I think it is just self-qualified people. There's a massive argument about why you actually need an app in the first place. What can it actually offer you that the web browser version can't? And so typically it just has to be speed and ease of use is the main advantage that you can get as a customer. So the only reason you're going to do that is if you're a regular customer anyway. So you only have to look at somebody like ASOS or Boohoo or Pretty Little Things to realize that sort of customer is purchasing from them frequently and fast. So an app is absolutely brilliant for that sort of market. But there's there's zero point in having one if a customer purchases from you once every 2 years as a gift.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That was brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Matthew.
No worries, and apologies the old technical issues at the beginning. The old gremlins crept up again,
Yeah,
and
it's one of those things.
remain elusive behind the black screen that says
I think no, I think we dealt with it as gracefully as possible. So I just wanted to thank everybody for coming along today, and to there'll be a little customer questionnaire that we send out. If you could fill that in afterwards with your feedback on what your thoughts are on today. Other than that, you can get in touch with us for support on anything that you've heard in the webinar today, through our inbox or through the website. And it's been fantastic having you all. Thanks a lot, everybody, and I'll see you all again next time.